Okay, hello everybody, good morning. I want to discuss a very important subject. This is the subject of Spinoza, the philosopher Baruch Spinoza. And of course, like any such broadcast, it will be only on the really the tip of the iceberg. It's really just a touch in a very big and huge subject. But as we've discussed in the previous broadcast about Immanuel Kant, uh, Spinoza, like Kant and like many other thinkers, have been widely misinterpreted in terms of what he is saying about religious matters, about spiritual matters, about questions of faith, of belief, and so on. And this misinterpretation is not a coincidence. It is um, simply part of the fashions, let's say, that humanity went through since the introduction of these books, these introductions of these ideas. Some of the generations were not qualified to understand them properly. Some of the generations took them and recruited them to saying things that they did not. That he did not. He did not say what a lot of people put in his mouth. He did not say. And like we saw about Kant, similarly about Spinoza, he had a certain message in many things, and this message was hugely distorted. And partially because not always society was qualified to understand these things. But in our time and age, 21st century, we come to an existential crisis. We come to a very deep existential crisis within humanity that obliges us to start looking at the big treasures that were left by previous generations, try to understand things that were written in plain sight, but were misunderstood. And some of them are critical for our time and age. Okay? A lot of it has to do with religious thinking and the role of religion within society. Now, Spinoza is often presented as the great symbol of the beginning of the enlightened age, maybe before, like the first atheist. Is considered the first atheist thinker, the first secular thinker. And this is a lot of propaganda. A lot of this is propaganda, a lot of this is not true, and a lot of this is oversimplification of the ideas of these great men, of these great thinkers. Because we are very inclined to think things in a binary manner. Either you're religious or you're secular. Yeah? Oversimplifying things like this so that it would be easy for us to put them in a box. Things that are a bit more deep, a bit less superficial, a bit less shallow, are very hard for us to deal with. So the moment there is somebody like Spinoza, you always want to put him in a box. Are you religious or not? Okay, I don't mind. You're secular. When it comes to such things, it's a bit ridiculous, right? Because the whole idea of these thinkers was to go out from this superficiality. But once they're dead, they cannot answer back, right? The books are left, and the institution can do whatever it wants with them. So first of all, Spinoza by himself denounces these accusations against him in the letters very clearly. So that this accusation against him that he is somehow atheistic or non-believer or whatever is simply not true. It's clearly not true. Yeah, the ethics starts with God as its first subject. But I want to deal now with a bit more sensitive facets of his thinking, and this is in the Theological Political Treatise, where he underscored his theological thinking. And some of this is by itself a bit let's say very abridged or very simple-minded in some of the things that he writes. Yeah, it all requires discussion in length, but it's not the point now. But this book also was considered a book forged in hell, right? That's the way people refer to the theological political treatise. A book going against all institutionalist religions, against a lot of conceptions that were predominant in his time. And it was a very, very revolutionary book, right? But like we discussed about Kant, Spinoza is often presented as somebody that went completely against religion. Religion is unnecessary, it's not needed, and so on. But this is not true. It's not what he said. Not at all. Like Kant, Spinoza does understand that religion plays a fundamental role in society. Religion, spirituality, however you want to call it. It is something inherent to the human condition. It is important. It has its place. But what Spinoza advocated for is that religion will serve its purpose and not go out from its boundaries. Outside of its boundaries and occupy regions of the human thinking that it does not belong to, because it's not its purpose. So Spinoza argued science has its purpose, and it is one thing. Philosophy has its purpose. Philosophy, science, for him, I think it was more or less the same. And philosophy comes to explain certain things. Religion has its boundaries, and within its boundaries, religion is extremely important. It is necessary, it is mandatory, and we cannot run away from it. And you see, in our modern world, in Western society thought that they can run away from religion. Okay, the old superstitious religions, we understand that we graduated. They do not necessarily speak to Western society anymore. Fine. But in effect, in humanity as a whole only becomes more religious than in the past. And the religion that humanity adopts in the 21st century is the most superstitious and, let's say, primitive form of religion that we have ever observed. And not that I'm saying that Islam by itself is a primitive religion. God forbid, no. But the massive dissemination of the version of religions that we are seeing, that in this case is Islam, it could have just as well been Christianity or even Judaism, just as well. But the popular version of religions, the way they are getting disseminated in the 21st century, is the most superstitious. We cannot run away from it. Humanity has a need for religion. And today, Sweden, Finland, Germany, France, all these nations that have lifted the banner of secularity, materialism, modernity, and so on, which is all fine, de facto are being conquered by exactly the kind of things they wanted to run away from. They didn't want the superstitious, primitive religion of Christianity, abandoned it, and now are being conquered by the superstitious version of Islam. And again, God forbid, I'm not passing any criticism on Islam per se. I am just saying that this is exactly the warnings that form the mass superstitious type of, mass production of religion. That humanity brings out from itself without proper guidance. So these things are not just philosophical ponderings. They are the future of humanity depends on it. Not less than it depends on development of the future AI or technology or flying cars. We don't know anymore what to do with all of this technology because the existential questions are bringing us into a crisis. De facto, it's a crisis. It's not just in spiritual terms. It's really the main political question of our time. Because both according to Spinoza and according to Kant, religion is a given. It must be in society. The only question is which type of religion, how mature it will be. Whether it will be a modern version of religion, a future type of religion, or that we will go into the most primitive version we can come up with. And when the intellectual forces of humanity neglect the development of a mature, properly functional, spiritual thinking, it collapses to the most immature circles, the most primitive ones. And again, not God forbid to say that Islam by itself is such. Any religion can bring out from it advanced concepts or primitive concepts, very simply put. So according to Spinoza, he advocates that religion must serve its purpose. And when religion tries to intermingle with philosophy and theology, tries to intermingle with science, this is a dangerous thing. Because religion should deal not with absolute scientific questions. How the world was created. Not a religious question. It's a scientific question. What happened in history? This has nothing to do with religion. How does religion have to do with what happened in history? Was the world created in 6 days? Of course not. And how is it relevant? A talking snake. What relevance does it have to do to the human condition of the human spirit, of morality, of ethics? Nothing. So of course everybody will stand up on their legs and say this, it's all very nice, but you cannot contradict the scriptures themselves, right? So the first impression towards Spinoza would be, it would all have been nice and fine, but you are raping religion to be something that it's not, because the Bible, be the New Testament, the Bible, the Quran, whatever, they all speak about events in history. When God created the world in 6 days and so on, and then the snake was talking and the Exodus happened and all of these things. It clearly tries to convey some sort of history, right? Some sort of stories, some sort of things that happened. I don't know, in Christianity, Jesus died on the cross. In Islam, Muhammad received a revelation in Arabia from the angel, from Gabriel. So what are all these stories? So Spinoza has a remarkable answer for this. He says the intention of the original authors of the holy books, of the scriptures, was not to teach us history. They by themselves knew that all these stories are symbolic. The real content is symbolic, and even if they have some echoes of historic events, I don't know, for instance, the existence of King David, the existence of the Second Temple, maybe something that resembles the Exodus thousands of years ago. Even if they do have some echoes of historical events, the historical events are not the main thing. If you want to study history, open a history book. If you the stories of the religious texts, the authors themselves knew that these stories are symbolic. And this is very easy to miss in Spinoza's writings, especially when they are filtered out in a way that does not spell it out so clearly. Let me read you a sentence here from the Political Theological Treatise, chapter 15, I believe. Let me see. Chapter 15, indeed. As for the bearing on Scripture, we have shown in chapter 7 that the meaning of Scripture should be gathered from its own history and not from the history of nature in general, which is the basis of philosophy. Again, what a remarkable sentence. He says, Scripture has a history of its own. It's a closed system, symbolic system, from its very beginning. And the authors and the common readers in the time knew and understood this. It's a closed system of its own. It does not come to tell us how the world was created. Symbolic. Like, Lacan, the great psychoanalytician, Jacques Lacan, he advocated that within the human psychology itself there is a few categories. Two of them, out of the three, are the symbolic and the real. Within our own psychology, there is these two categories. There is the symbolic, the real, and the imaginary. And it occurs in the psychology of any individual person. The real is the real reality. Maybe the Exodus never happened. Maybe, for sure, the world was not created in 6 days and there was no talking snake. Maybe Jesus didn't even live and has never been crucified on a cross. Maybe the angel Gabriel never came to Muhammad in the 7th century. Maybe. From the point of view of Scripture, it is meaningless whatsoever whether these events happened or not. Because they are closed system by itself. Within the psychology of humanity, they live in the symbolic and the imaginary realms. And saying that something is imaginary or symbolic does not degrade it to being meaningless. It comes to teach us spiritual truths, symbolic truths, moral truths, if we understand the language in which it is written. But if we think that it comes to teach us about reality, about the real, physical, corporal, materialistic world, we are grossly mistaken. This is the realm of science and philosophy. And when we mix these things, we hurt science and we hurt religion. Meaning, according to Spinoza, this whole argument between who is the correct, is it science or religion, is a fallacy by its own. These two sides of the argument absolutely do not understand the subject on which they are arguing. And the pitfall is that most of the so-called, including religious people in our day and age, and already for hundreds of years, are falling into this pitfall. Because they do not understand that the written word, the Scripture, comes to convey not scientific truths. It encodes spiritual, religious, metaphysical ideas. And once you are mistaken in this, you absolutely do not understand religion whatsoever. You fell in the first pitfall. And that is what Spinoza is trying to work. Therefore, Spinoza did not come to ruin religion or to demolish it. In an absolutely secular, materialistic way like he's often presented. On the contrary, he came to defend religion and to uplift it for its original and true purpose. And I strongly believe that if we will understand these ideas and develop them and cultivate them, not individually, but in society as a whole, society will greatly benefit from such an exploration, especially in our time and age, in the 21st century, because people have a need for it. Superstitious religion is dangerous. We already have hundreds of years of experience on how dangerous it can be. And also in our time and age, we see the dangers of an incorrect approach to religion. But we should suggest a correct one. And that is what a lot of the great thinkers of the past have tried to do. But we misunderstood them because they were ahead of their time. Spinoza, Kant, and so on. Their whole project was to lead to a correct version of a method for the satisfaction of the spiritual needs of humanity. And this was grossly misunderstood. Because these thinkers were presented as completely materialistic, which they were not. I truly believe that the future of humanity depends on a proper channeling and dealing with this kind of thought in the level of society as a whole in our time and age. The institutions that this was their job were of course the academic institutions, but something is not properly working for the last few years in this realm. And if the academy will properly update itself to these directions, it will be not less, if not more important, endeavor than the technological scientific directions of the exact sciences. Meaning, if we will reinstitute the original purpose of the humanistic studies, it will be not less but more important than the technological scientific explorations in which the scientific community and the academic community excels. Meaning today there is a lot of criticism on the academy, and it's very dangerous actually, very dangerous criticism on the humanistic side of the academy. People want to close it down. People are either abandoning it or accusing it for... they want it gone. And it's very dangerous. Instead of this, we need to understand how important and critical it is. And this idea is exactly what we need now. Okay, so good morning everybody. Have a nice day. Goodbye. I hope that this is useful. If it is useful, of course, disseminate, subscribe, talk about this, engage, discuss in whatever way you can, and of course advance these ideas further. Study Spinoza, study Kant in your own eyes, not through filters, and see that it is often very different than the way it is presented.